Mr. Michael Martin of the Regeneration Podcast. How are you?
Hey, uh, the world is crazy.
It is crazy.
Everything's nuts,
Yeah,
Mike.
I saw that, and we're going to have to get into that aspect. But only recently, I was at a dinner last night with dear friends. We were talking about AI. But this week, I used AI kind of on a little astrological thing. And
Hmm.
again, like, you don't have to go to your favorite sites on astrology to say that, like, AI is saying, like, these next couple months are going to be crazy. But we'll get into that. But Michael,
Did AI
yesterday,
say that?
yeah.
What did AI say?
Um, I'd have to, that because the outer planets, there's so many changes in the outer planets moving temporarily or
Yeah.
for longer periods of times, especially Pluto. We got some crazy stuff going on.
Well, that's all AI does is aggregate everything everybody's
Yeah,
already said, and that's what,
right, right.
no,
Yeah, but it was
that's the deal, right?
pretty ominous. And I called you yesterday or texted you and said, let's hop on. We'll let our listeners know. I think we'll see our friend Philip from last week might pop on a little bit. Sometimes we're surprised by a visit from our friend Guido Preparata, who actually uh, he met up with a friend of mine from the monastery over in Italy this weekend. They
No.
had a great
Oh,
conversation. Father George, the abbot, he was there for a meeting,
huh.
and yep, very dear friend. And so, but I was quite taken, Michael, like when the whole obviously listeners were talking kind of about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and its aftermath and its kind of dialogues and its narratives. But the day after, I admit to kind of coming to it late. I had to drive to a meeting and it was going to be about 55 minutes away. And so my go-to guy lately, it's always been is Glenn Greenwald. He's so consistent. He's so consistent. Like he's a principled and courageous man, and I think courage. But so I was just listening
He's
to
like the
him,
old kind of fashion journalist, right?
isn't he? Yeah, he sure is.
He's not, I mean, he's certainly,
Fearless.
he comes from the left, but he's a journalist first,
Yeah.
so I can respect him.
And again, like the way everybody, and I'm thinking of Candace Owens here, and I can't figure it out, but the way everybody's using the name Jesus nowadays, like that Glenn Greenwald didn't get into that game, which is a separate issue but might come in. But he just began his podcast or the system update, and I think it's just you could look up and I'll link it. Glenn Greenwald reacts to Charlie Kirk assassination, and you'd find it. But he
Hmm.
spent about 45 minutes, and there was no zero affectation, zero. And you knew he was just talking from his own script. This is what he believes. There was the authenticity factor times about a million, but there
Right.
was no fake passion. But he was just thinking out loud as he does, and he's got courage just running through his veins. And he said something more better than Bob Barron and all these people who are wonderful. Don't get me wrong, wonderful. But he just he praised the church for like at least not changing fast. But then he went into a better disquisition on the sanctity of all human life than I've heard any theologian or anybody do.
Hmm.
And it's not that they do it poorly, but he saw it and he could follow it with principles, and he
Right.
could talk about his own temptations, and how he used to be, how he used to be, and why he feels better for being this way now. And yet, we're living in Gerardian times. We're under the name of like, how dare the talk about somebody who died, even though the left and right does it all the time. It's this Gerardian, like
It
it's
was
going to be this
different this
yeah.
time, I think.
Tell
It
me,
was
tell me.
different.
Yeah. Oh, there
Because
was
people
something
were saying,
different.
well, what about those Democratic politicians that were killed? Well, they weren't killed live being filmed, right? In a public space.
Yeah, the
And
reaction to this is going to be
that's
different.
so I happen when so I was working here in my office editing a book, and when I get to the end of a chapter, I'll go on social media for a few minutes just to get the book out of my head. And I happen to see the Charlie Kirk assassination in real time. I saw the real thing. I mean, it wasn't. He's not somebody I follow, but it just happened to show up. It said Charlie Kirk was shot, and
Yeah.
I looked.
I've never
And I
really
don't know if
followed him,
you
but I was very
saw
aware of him.
the video of him getting shot, but it was disturbing.
Mhm.
And when he and I said, "There's no way he lives. There's no way he's going to live from this." And that's the weirdest thing, though. I don't know if this is how people from the left. It was like you said, it was a Girardian moment. It was um it was like almost in Medea, where they're covering themselves in blood and rejoicing in the moment, which was it's just surreal, surreal. Even people I know, friends of mine, were kind of doing this.
Right.
And I was just kind of
You don't see, and again, this
blown.
was more dramatic, but you don't see, again, Greenwald, I think in the same thing, just easily puts down like the fact that he can give 50 examples of where the right has done the same thing. And it's like right now the right wants to, huge factions want to suppress the free speech of the left. There's just no doubt. And so I'm not totally, there's different temperaments, I'd say, between the left and the right. The leftist temperament towards evil might be more aromatic, right? The rightist temperament might be more luciferic. But in terms of like using this moment, it's another emergencyocracy for me. Like we're just going to lose more. The powers that be are kind of in the ascendant, I think. But tell me more.
Well, I think what I'm seeing is different.
Yeah,
Um, and I saw it yesterday, and with that, I don't know if you caught anything about the protests in England,
yeah, I did.
which was huge.
Yeah,
And I'm watching the video, and it seems like somebody described it like a Trump rally, which is usually, it's not violent agitation or anything. And I'm watching it, but I was also watching the response of British elites, even some who were friends of mine, dismissing the working class who were protesting, and I think rightfully protesting after they've been put through the screws by the Labor government and actually the conservative government before that. There's not really much. There's even less daylight between conservative left and right in England than there is in the U.S. And it was disgusted me to see people dismiss these working class. And it wasn't just white people either. It was
yeah.
working class Brits who have had enough, have had enough, right? And interestingly, our friend John Michael Greer, what did he say this morning? I gotta read this for
It's
you.
funny always.
He said, "At this point, I expect the elite replacement cycle to continue at full throttle. The Democrats have made a lethal mistake by supporting the murder of a very popular figure and it's blowing up in their faces. There's a
Right.
website assembling a database of nearly 20,000 people who posted vile things online cheering Kirk's murder. And a good many of those people are going to wish they had never been born. The firings have already started. Even Stephen King, who as usual was a complete douchebag about the subject, is
Uh-huh.
frantically backpedaling at this point. My guess is his publisher got on the phone and screamed at him for an hour or so. The optics of this are so bad and the public reaction so strong, and I think you can apply this to what's going on in England as well, that it's entirely possible at this point that the GOP will sweep the 2026 midterms, break the back of the Democratic Party machine, and lay off huge swaths of the permanent bureaucracy. We'll have to see, but it's looking surprisingly promising right now. Now,
Can see that.
so that's and the weird thing is, right? And that's what I was thinking about is for years the narrative have been the right are a bunch of gun nuts, Second Amendment gun nuts. They're given to violence, but at least over the last short period, the violence, gun violence that makes the headlines anyway,
Yeah,
has,
but what do you think though? This
but
way of
it's
looking
all
at
on the
it though,
left.
yeah.
It's
I
all
know.
from the
I think
left.
I would say you're being caught up in this, Michael. I mean, this is
No.
the the real thing. Philip Bambo, he just Phil Balboni just said he'll hop on a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what he thinks. That it seems to me the end game, like looking at Rod Dreher, for example, and I
Hmm.
think these are connected. With our friends Pat Deneen and Chad Pecknold, and it's Orbanism. And so we might like owning the thing, but I don't
Well,
think there's any other end game.
what
It's this
what is
idea.
Orban doing that's so wrong?
It's not so wrong, but there's
What's he
still just
doing? I
another
want to
way.
know. I want to
A,
know.
a top-down kind of authoritarian, nothing bottom up, right? You're looking for it's more of a
I
crowd phenomenon than anything to
I
do with
don't
the
see.
kingdom of
Do you
God.
see that in the U.S.? I don't see that in the U.S.
I
And
see,
I
oh sure I do. I see what's happening, Michael, is there's going to be this, it's not maybe where you are, but there's no mistaking this reaction that said we will go after them. We will suppress them. People demanding a public execution. This is playing to the opposite of Glenn Greenwald, is playing to
But
the most
it's
base
been
part of what it
the
means to be
point is,
human.
Mike, though, it's been
Yeah, yeah.
building up and building up.
I don't
And I
disagree.
tell you this, and I told you this before. You corner people, you keep telling people they're racist and they have, people, poor white people, that they have
That
white
is what's going
privilege.
on. That is
You
what's going
keep
on.
doing that. You keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. And this is what's happening in England. Eventually, they're going to say enough's enough.
Yeah.
And then he who sows the wind is going to reap the whirlwind. And I think that's where
I
we're.
can't take
But
joy in that. I'm
this
going back
is
to Glenn
what. But
Greenwald.
the
I
thing
can't take
is,
joy in that at all. That's all
no, I
Spangler.
can't either. But this
Yeah,
narrative has been coming from the World Economic Forum and
definitely.
those kinds of people who were behind and are still behind all the propaganda and all. I mean, I would even, the George Soros kind of contingent
Mhm.
that have were behind not only the massive illegal immigration all across the West
But let's
and in this
see
country.
let's, for example, and this isn't something I'm feeling confident working from, like something that's been claimed. Let's say they go after Soros. This is the cycle I see. They go after Soros. You and I
Well, they should have
we'd
gone
be
after
fine
him
with
years
that.
ago.
Yeah, but then Trump and the Epstein thing is just gone, gone. And it would be. It would be.
Um,
That's part of this thing, the way it's being directed and massaged. I
mhm.
just don't think we get anywhere. And I think, again, I began with Glenn Greenwald to say, I don't think relishing in other people's destruction is the way forward. I'm not saying you're doing that, but I don't think there's anything good about Orbanism. It's just these people, I know them in the church. It's confusing means and ends, right? And so
Yeah,
for me, like William Blake would vomit it out of his mouth. And so there are revolutionaries who don't agree with confusing means and ends in this way, and forming crowds. Salvation for our time is trying to get people out of crowd phenomenons. But all these opinions, I would let's segue, not to segue that we need to stay there, but it's interesting to me that, is he a groiper or is he a leftist, right? It seems to me he's a groiper who had a transgendered boyfriend, but I don't know. I don't know.
I
That's my
well,
strong
that's
guess.
rather a stretch. Yeah, I think.
Tell me more.
No,
What's the
doesn't.
argument
I
against
mean,
it? I
we'll
think
see.
that's it.
We'll find
Yeah.
out. We'll
Yeah.
find out. But
I was going to put that forth as, to me, that seems
why
obvious.
would he try to take out Charlie Kirk if he's a
Because the
crook?
Groypers, you can go, it's very easy for that group. You can go to Nick Fuentes calling Charlie Kirk Hephaestus, and all the shell casings have language. The opera he referenced, everything. I'm buying these arguments. Every shell casing were Groyper online memes. They were just Groyper online memes.
Hmm.
So I don't think we're going to get out of them seeing
Well,
that. But this huge narrative has come with, like, we need to own the leftists, and we're going to have egg on our faces, like my point number 5 on this issue.
um, I don't know. We'll find out. I don't want
Yeah.
to. I mean, who knows? It could be. It could be like the attempted assassination of Donald Trump a year ago.
Yeah, I think there's a
You know,
computer thing. I think I would make this claim too. He's a guy who, and again, I'm so open to being wrong on this, but right now, my read, he was a guy who lived his whole life online. Our friend
and
Tara Deek had a great essay. People should find it, on transgenderism.
right,
But
right.
these people who live their whole life online, it would be easy to be a groiper. The groipers hate transgenderism, but for me, I've worked with young people. It's just so easy when you look at yourself as a computer to be a groiper and be like you have a transgender boyfriend, if that's what ends up
Yeah,
being the case.
it's hard to. That's
I
hard.
don't. Gosh, I've met this. To
But
me,
I
it's
will
just
say this, and I
very
think you're
real.
right, and
Yeah.
I commented about this the other day,
Mhm.
is that this wouldn't happen without the COVID lockdowns and all the others.
I don't
He's
disagree with that
22.
either. I don't
So
disagree with
that
that either.
happened, went down. If he's kid's 22, so it went down when he was 16 or 17, right? He was in high school, and I saw it in real time. We talked about this before. Those kids were shoved online to get all trauma all the time, and they're
Right.
trying to find something as a semblance of community. And
Mhm.
and I don't think I think I told you this before, is before the COVID thing, you never saw trans students in a college.
Right. 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 Right.
After there was like mushrooms after a
It
rainstorm.
was so easy to convince people because they
And
identified
people,
with
and I think,
computers.
what I could, and a couple of kids I had as students were like that, and I talked to them, and this one kid would confide in me, and he said, he, I could tell that what he was suffering from was his PTSD, and that it went to the point where it went to this extreme point where he had to or she had to inflict damage. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl to start with, to tell you the truth. Um, that inflicted serious harm on
Mhm.
the body, and this kid would cut himself too,
Yeah.
right? It was
Mhm.
so it was a complex of things, and then they put him on, SSRIs or whatever they call them, right?
Yeah.
So now they're even worse.
Yeah.
And as we
I would say,
know,
go ahead. Yeah,
you know, mass shootings and violent outbursts are connected to those kinds of drugs.
I think so.
Yeah, so what do you expect?
Yeah.
What did you expect when it
No, and
happened?
I don't want to speak for you, but for our listeners too, when I recommend like Tara's essay, I would say transgenderism for dummies, and I would love your opinion, is we think that's very different than something like gay marriage. That for me, like having been at the
Oh,
college, transgenderism is not like part of a continuum, it's a break. And we might have people who think this
it's a
way,
psychotic
but
break. Yeah.
entering the world of ideas as it's entered, it's very hard to admit with somebody else that you're seeing the same thing in a different way. So, for example, in the college, you and I were both asked, Michael, that like in one context, the difference between gender was essentialism. If you called something that was feminine masculine, you were ostracized. But
Hmm.
then the next second, you're asked to do a dance where there was no such thing as gender. So one
Right.
minute gender was reified and masculinity had nothing to do with femininity.
And,
And the next minute there was no such thing as gender. And it was a bridge too far.
and then with the trans thing, my early joke was, why do they always want to be, male to female trannies always want to be Barbie? Is that their idea of feminine beauty?
This is a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And again, I think many of those people are victims,
But
and I think
I
you
got
would
a
agree
great
too.
Barbie
Yeah.
story. Let me tell you
Go.
this.
Go.
So we never let our girls play with Barbies. And
We did, I think.
so one time when I was a
She
Waldorf
was pretty.
teacher, we're
I
going
have a
to,
brother-in-law who played Ken. I got to get this in. My brother-in-law, Chris Cook, shout out, actor, voiceover actor. There was one rendition of the Ken doll, and then he was, I think it was royalty, who was like Prince Ken. And if you pulled out like we used to have, you pull out the string, his voice was Ken saying some things, and he got a paycheck from Hanna-Barbera or whoever is
that's fun.
responsible for Barbie. Go ahead.
But anyway, yeah, so my Barbie story. So I was teaching at a Waldorf school and we were going on a field trip and I think I had five girls in my van. We were only going a couple miles away. I think we were going to the Detroit Opera House or something. And I just talking to the girls, they were talking about stuff. I said, "Hey girls, do you guys play with Barbie?" And all the girls did except for one girl whose name was Melani, and her mom was a Detroit cop. She said, "My mama don't let me play with Barbie." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because my mama said she got all them clothes and that nice house, but she ain't got no job."
I've never heard that one.
Oh, I almost drove off the road on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if
But
we had
that's
Barbies.
that's
Yeah.
the weird thing is these kind of weird stereotypes that you're never supposed to use
Hmm.
are the go-tos. Like, right, in fact, it was I remember, was it Dennis Miller or something like that? He said, they're talking about stereotypes, gay stereotypes. And he said, "You want to
Hmm.
see gay stereotypes? Go to a pride parade."
Hmm. Hmm.
Which is true, right?
Totally.
And that's
Totally.
what do you do with this, right? What, but the thing is, then they tell you you can't even mention that, but it's right in your face.
Now, but when people are saying, and again, I'm admitting to our listening audience that like we're living this in real time. Inform me. I'm not so sure. Where does the transgender connection, even when I read Tara's essay, it would just be we could say that he had a boyfriend who was transgender. Is that the working hypothesis? Or that he himself was transgender?
That a
I just
boyfriend
don't know. Okay.
or the boyfriend was, that's, I mean, who knows?
Yeah. So in that one,
When you're
again,
in the
people
early
can date.
days of these
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
investigations, you always found out everything is wrong 3 weeks later, right?
Yeah, and so I don't mind saying, and it can admit like next week, I hope I can show
But
the humility of admitting. But I'm going to say, Michael, right now,
but
I think
that's
the Groiper thing is for real. And I'll just say it the way I said it is that, like, and again, I think Cash Patel's delay was, they're going after Cash Patel. I think they probably got the guy, and then they were trying to create a narrative, that they just needed. They had to say, "Whoa, we don't have the guy. We need to create a narrative." But if you get
I don't
online and
know.
you connect the dots, the easiest way is the one I
But
think,
what I do think
and I
though,
could be
Mike,
proven wrong. And we'll see
is
what the narrative says too.
I keep telling Bonnie this too. Said what we have to be aware of when these things happen is you have bad actors running both sides of the table,
Mhm.
right? So they might throw out, the say the trans angle, but then
Right.
they'll counter it with the Groiper angle. So you don't know
Uh-huh.
which way's
Right.
up and which way's down.
Yeah. I'm having
So
fun. I'm stating
that's the
exactly
thing
what I
is,
see is right now, though. And I'll always do that. This is the way
and
I'll
I
connect
think
the dots. So.
and I think a lot of people are willing, because of COVID, because we were so bullshitted over COVID, that people who had remember, all the at the beginning of COVID, all the conspiracy theorists ended up being right.
Right, right, right.
Even though, and they, in fact, even people like Naomi Wolf and countless others were deplatformed or
Your
demonetized.
microphone, your microphone seemed to fade in and out there for a
Did it?
second.
I was because I'm
Yeah, now I hear you.
moving around because I'm agitated.
Yeah.
Uh, but people were deplatformed and demonetized,
Hmm, hmm.
and they were right. We were.
Yeah,
Remember when we did the interview with Dr. Thorpe? We
sure.
got booted, right?
Yeah.
We got booted. Larry Chapp, Larry, if you're out there, Larry got us
That's number
booted.
two. I've got to take some classes, I think, for YouTube too, to keep our standing. I'll have to see what they're like.
You have to take
Um,
rest.
yeah, or there's something I keep on getting notified when I upload podcasts.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Again, your microphone, I think right now I can't hear it, Michael.
Can you hear me now?
From a distance, it's like not
Really?
up. Yeah, yeah. I think that's not just me.
Any better?
Yeah, right there it was.
It's better.
That is now.
Okay, good.
Yep. What do you think? Again, as of today, we can put these in a time capsule. For me, if it's true, very, very, very interesting storyline, and you can document it online, and then other people will substantiate it. And when Philip joins us, which he texted me, he will be joining us. His favorite reporter is Max Blumenthal. He says he's the most fearless reporter out there. I think Greenwald's pretty fearless. But the story that in the past couple of weeks, I know this from my son, or at least I have an angle on it, and I'm totally open to being disagreed with, is that Tucker, from Tucker to Candace Owens to all these people, they're kind of singing a different tune lately. I'll keep it wide open on Israel,
Right.
Palestine. In the last couple of weeks, Charlie Kirk had been a stalwart on that, but we know at their Turning Point conference this year, you could see it online, Tucker
Mhm.
Carlson was speaking and kind of singing a different tune there. They say in the last couple of weeks, Charlie Kirk, this is interesting, you know, and again, they can show you he was. And Max Blumenthal seems to be the reporter on this. And Philip he's got the latest on Max Blumenthal. But the storyline that in the last couple of weeks, if not a month, Charlie Kirk himself was singing a completely different tune. The
Mhm.
allegations being too that he was refusing money from Israel. The
Right.
allegations too that the Prime Minister of Israel too. These are just allegations. It was calling him personally to say you're on board with us, and this was going to be a seismic, cataclysmic break because every young conservative was breaking with another generation of conservatives in a certain vision of telling the story of Israel. And
Mhm.
again, let's say um, that is Spenglerian, less than for John Michael Greer. Again, I appreciate his insights. I'm much more into Rosenstock Hussey because Christ was born. Christ was unique in history. It was at the center of history. The incarnation is still working itself out. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not doomed to repeat history's mistakes. A lot of the young people who are listening to Martyr Maid and other historians online, they're using Spengler because the guy was prophetic for a dead world, as if Christ didn't matter. And he showed these cycles of history. And yes, Trump is a Caesar figure. It's all working out. You and I might disagree on Orban. I just think it's a different form of Caesarism, and I think we can do better. The
But I
nation
think what we
state, we
get
got
with
to work at
Orban,
destroying the nation state,
we
you
only
know?
get the information they tell us, right?
Right.
Um, and I think
I'd rather
and
live
I
under
think
Orban than I would live in Germany or Britain right now. There's no doubt.
sure. Fuck yes. But I think we get you see it across the world that these populist politicians who actually, whoops, what did I do? Um, these populist politicians who um, are really they're opposed to the World Economic Forum and those types, and they're actually those types are opposed to them, like Bolsonaro, and right, well, didn't he just go to prison in
He
Brazil?
did. Yeah.
Yeah, for what?
Right, right,
Like they
right.
were
No,
trying
and
to
Glenn
do to
Greenwald's
Trump,
great
right?
on
Like they
that
were
one
trying to do
too.
to
So,
Trump, like they did to
but let me
Marie Le
make a point
Pen,
here. Again, according
right?
to our friend, doesn't make him right, but for me, this is where I stand on Donald Trump. Our friend Guido says it well. He cleared customs with COVID. Like the guy just cleared customs. He brought it in. This is
I
significant, Michael. This is
I agree.
significant.
I agree, and that was
So
a
under
big criticism
Orban
I had of
types,
him
you
too.
still get things like COVID. I want a better world than that. And that
Well, we'll
seems
see what
marginally
happens too,
better to
because
me. Yeah,
I don't know if
marginally
you
better.
I don't know if you've been paying attention to, speaking of COVID,
Yeah.
to this impending announcement from Bobby Kennedy in the Health and Human
What's
Services
I know that he's in the center of
about that.
controversy.
Well, it's about vaccines, and they're about to
Yeah.
drop the bomb, I think.
Hmm.
And he actually already Pfizer and Moderna and those places, their stock futures started to tank
Hmm.
because they're anticipating what's going to come out. And rightfully so. I mean, I don't know if you saw it. I wrote about a
Totally.
Substack about,
Totally. Yeah.
what did
Yeah.
I call it? Confessions of a Legacy Anti-Vaxxer
Hmm.
on my Substack the other day. And I even the first thing I wrote on that Substack was trigger warning. I don't care if I lose subscribers, and I did lose a bunch of subscribers, but
Uh-huh.
I don't give any Fs anymore about that. After it almost killed my wife,
Right. Right. Right.
um, and other
But you
people.
would do it with right now. I'll tell you where I am with that. Like it seems to me, and again, I just don't know that much. But like measles, mumps, rubella, we don't need to be tyrannical about it. Probably, the entrance point for me on that one is that all of a sudden you have good pills and bad pills. It's like when you tell somebody they smell, it's a funny word because you're not saying whether they smell good or bad. It seems to imply bad. Pills after like thilamide and some of the others, I guess, they
Thalidomide,
started
yeah.
getting a bad name. But all of a sudden, like the first vaccine, let's say the polio vaccine, like I don't know. I'd have to look into it. Maybe you could convince me out of it today.
Well,
I heard it
what
was a
I've
good thing. I heard it was a good thing.
I'm not an
Yeah,
expert at it, but
yeah,
the experts I've heard who are
yeah.
critics of it
Uh-huh.
say that what really the reason for what they were calling polio was DDT. There was
Interesting. Yeah, I
they
do
would
too.
actually, if you ever in this, you can see it in the movie, and I kind of remember this when I was a little kid, but in the movie Tree of Life, there's this moment where the bug truck's coming through the neighborhood and they're spraying the
I do
neighborhood
remember that.
with
Yeah,
DDT, and kids are running in the cloud behind the truck.
it's a good
And I
movie
kind of
reference. Yeah,
remember doing that. It's like I
yeah,
would have been really little when that happened, but that does bring back memories.
yeah,
And Suzanne Humphreys is her name. You want to check her out.
yeah.
She's the one who I think I got that story from. And the reason and COVID and polio was really prevalent in rural communities because they were using DDT on the cows.
Yeah, I just don't know. Maybe. Yeah,
No, I mean, they were. It
yeah,
wasn't they
yeah.
maybe they were.
What's
And
the measles,
here's the
mumps, rubella
thing.
one? Go. Yeah.
Get this. So my brother-in-law Dan. So this is about 7 years ago, probably. He got sick and he ended up with Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Tell me more about it. I know the name. I don't know what it
Well, it's
does.
polio, but
Oh, okay,
it's the
gotcha.
same symptoms as polio.
Yeah.
All of a sudden he couldn't walk,
Uh-huh.
and they thought he was going to die, and he didn't. He didn't. I mean, he pulled through, and for a while there, he walked with a cane. And I'm remembering him at my son's wedding in 2019. He was still walking with a cane. Um, but his doctor told him when he got this, he said, "You were probably just around somebody who got the flu vaccine
Mhm.
because it was probably from shedding, and you have a reaction to that."
Uh-huh.
This doctor said that, and that was before the whole COVID thing even started. So people, you know, became lost their minds. So as far as all of that stuff goes, I've been a legacy anti-vaxxer for 35 years
Right, right, right.
um, and there has always been information that those things were suspicious, right? But we also know that the U.S. government under Ronald Reagan, I can't remember the vaccine whatever act where they people couldn't sue vaccine companies or pharmaceutical companies for injury, which
Mhm,
is still a
mhm,
thing, right? And also, this is the only country besides New Zealand where pharmaceutical companies can advertise on television or anyplace else.
mhm, mhm.
And
That
what does
strikes me
that
as really
do?
weird.
And I think if you looked at the the budgets of all of the major networks, I think I can't remember, it's been a while since I heard this, but I think it's like 60% of their budget comes from pharmaceutical ads.
Yeah, I AI'd that this week. Again, and AI couldn't get out of the fact that like you can't account, you can't account for all the advertising based on, they're there if they give some information and encourages their people to talk to their doctor. They put every case they could, but it still
But
doesn't describe
but
the
are you
uh,
do you think
totally.
do you think the networks are gonna investigate any problems with it?
No, no, no. I think that's
No,
a strong
that's
point.
the
Nope.
thing.
No, I
That's
think
it.
I've always thought that was central.
Yeah.
Mhm. Let me
Um,
think, on vaccines in general, though, like when we talked about Rosenstock 2 weeks ago. A current book I'm reading, and I don't know what to do with it, but he was talking about the history that it's kind of self-evident once you think about it, but I wasn't aware. But he was pretty amazed at like the post stamp that the first time we had just kind of gotten to the California or the Pacific Ocean, and my dates are going to be wrong, but at a certain point, a Bostonian who wanted to send a letter like 5 miles away was paying the same amount to get a letter to Los Angeles, right? And this was a different way of doing things, but it was also kind of cool, you know? And I wonder if vaccine's part of a good vaccine. And yes, people, I guess, should be able to sue. We have to work that out. But I'm still, and I'm only putting it forth, that liberty part of me, would I have been against the uniform price postage stamp? Don't tell me what to do. I have that instinct towards don't tread on me. Um, and I think we could have a different world. Um, I think insurance could be run differently that's more conducive to
yeah.
liberty, especially health insurance. Like if you opt out of certain surgeries, like a Catholic health
Well,
insurance company could come up.
let
But
me.
but like there theoretically again could be a decent vaccine for me that there seems to be an element of coercion like in the post stamp. And I'm just thinking out loud, friends and Michael. But
Coercion, yeah.
yeah, it's a form of coercion, but that's partially what government is. I still think the we want a new form of government. I hope, Michael, when you talk about astrology, but I hope we can do, I think a nightmare we're going to wake up from is the era of the nation state, right? What is its definition? A large geographical entity that has a monopoly on who can die in its territory. And I just tend to think at this scale, it's seen its time. And that's how I don't call that a tertium quid, but
Well, I mean, yes
yeah.
and no. I mean, the nation state as a military power, yes, and but the idea, and this is what I think was happening with the flooding all the Western nations with people without any with not only without any papers, but then putting up in five-star hotels and all the other stuff. I mean,
It all happened.
like
Yep, that's
like
what.
you know in the United States, right? 300 was it 350,000? I think that might be a conservative estimate of children that the that came across the border that the government lost track of.
And I found that corroborated the first time you mentioned it. Not like I'm always fact checking, but I thought, wow, that because I work for the Office
That
of
is
Life Issues, I
that
deal
is
with
major
migrant
fucked up.
ministries. That is a big story. I think I saw it in the London Times. If people want
Yes.
to, it was
And
certainly like the London Times, the Wall Street Journal,
I
and let's
have
say it leaned conservative. Fine, but that's significant when a major news outlet doesn't retract that. And that is the number I read.
and that's crazy.
Yep, yep.
And talk about
It was a sea of humanity where a lot of people went missing.
even if only 10%, and that's
Yep,
not that's a, I mean, what percentage of those kids were trafficked?
yeah, yeah,
That and the thing that is it's too horrible to even think about.
yeah.
It's too horrible to even think about.
Uh-huh.
But I was going to go back. I mean, you were so speaking of insurance, you're speaking of insurance.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
blame gay marriage and the trans thing actually goes back to insurance. Because I don't know if you remember
Well,
this, Mike.
yeah.
Gay people, I've known gay people my whole life. Nope, no, gay people never wanted to get married until insurance companies were in hospital policy was cruel to say if you had a gay partners and one person's in the hospital and well you can't visit you're not a family member. Remember that one?
I don't think it's as causal as that.
No,
I would
yes it
still
was.
say,
It
yeah.
was back then. So it was going back 15 years ago or something.
If so, I would still say it's the role of like, as Guido would say, and it's not just because of Guido, I tend to agree with them, or I know I agree with them, that whole thing, it's more interesting for me to understand it as how the whole thing was played by the powers that be again, so that nobody cares about the poor anymore. It's part of that whole political correctness piece, which is his ideology of tyranny, a total masterpiece. And he shows how the conservatives and the liberals work together. The neocons were the
I
same
agree.
thing. Yep.
I
And now
agree.
we have a populist left and a populist right, and they're playing it the same way, I think. But because it's not true populism, it's kind of crowd phenomenon. And again, let me be honest. Populism, even at its best, has some elements of crowds. But I think, again, as we're getting
Right.
beyond, this isn't Greer's wheelhouse, but the role of the incarnation. We don't uh, swaying crowds is not necessarily the best way to do politics. We relied on it more in the past. I'd like to think there's a different way. And I
No.
think Orban is something
Well,
of a dinosaur, a relic, even though, again, I probably prefer it at this juncture. I don't know.
well, I don't think, swaying. I think we're in a way beyond trying to sway the public. Now they're like, fuck it, just make them do it, right? Which
On
is
what
which is
issue
what
are you
people are
talking about?
responding, and I think a lot of the unrest you see is because people, you know, you mentioned coercion.
Yeah.
So Bonnie got sick after being getting cancer
Hmm.
from trans what do you call it? Shedding,
Uh-huh.
right? And that was, of course, not a fun time in our family history.
Horrible time.
But that was also at the time that the Biden administration was pushing for that vaccine. Everybody's got to get a vaccine, and that colleges, universities, if they took any government money, they had to mandate it. Remember this?
I remember it all. I'm wondering out loud if Trump would have done much different. Again,
He didn't. He
I like
accepted
this
the mandate.
language.
He
He
wasn't
brought
going
the
to
whole
mandate it.
regime, though, in. He brought the
But
whole regime that made that happen.
and the
It's
other
like he
thing,
set up the army tent so that other people could do the dirty work. But he was
but the
definitely
other,
complicit. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. But he was
Yeah,
also pushing hydrochloroquine and what's the other
right,
one?
right.
Ivermectin,
Hmm.
which apparently also work,
Right,
right?
right.
And he was not going to mandate it, right? He's which explicitly he stated. Now, and then of course the weird thing is when he was doing that, right? Biden and Harris and all those assholes, they were saying, "I'm not going to get Donald Trump's vaccine." As soon as they're in office, they're like, "Shoot me up,"
That's
right?
true. That's true.
Uh, but then they were mandating it, and they were mandating. I was teaching at Adrian College at the time, part time, and it was coming down to the Supreme Court with the mandates, and the Supreme Court shot it down. And to Adrian College's uh, credit, that evening I got an email saying no one, students, faculty, nobody needs to get a vaccine. See you tomorrow.
Oh,
See you
well, yeah,
tomorrow, right?
yeah.
But not every college and university did that. University of Michigan up the road, they may even still require the COVID vaccine. I don't know. Um,
In New York, it was
but
much more
that's
tyrannical.
coercion. And Bonnie told me, she said,
Yeah,
you're going to have to quit because and here's her words exactly, I can't afford to lose another organ,
right.
right?
Hmm.
So that's coercion, and I think that. And again, you knew this was going to come back eventually. That people were going to go, "Eff it." You've been pushing me into a corner and pushed me into a corner for so long. I'm not doing it anymore, right? So it's like, why anybody's surprised? I don't know. But I think you also see, and I mentioned this before, that I think why COVID and all that stuff succeeded and why so many things succeed is because what you have is a magical operation at scale. And magic, if you read all the books going back to Plotinus or Neoplatonists or Juan Culiano and he talks about what's he call it, the magician state, which is where we're at right now,
Hmm.
that they use magical techniques to control the masses. And the way they do that, and this is precisely what happened with those poor training kids, and this is precisely what happened with COVID and with this whole generation and this kid who shot Charlie Kirk last week. I would place money on this, is that they were propagandized by two things, by repeated slogans and repeated images,
Some
right?
microphone problems, just letting you know.
Sorry, I don't know why that happens. Repeated
That's totally great. Yeah.
Re- I'm gonna- One of my kids been messing with my mic, I'm sure. But repeated, stay on message. They say that, and that's actually an incantation, or like when people do where they have those daily affirmation things. That's kind of a magical technique,
I
right?
agree. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you do it,
White magic,
and the
white
thing is,
magic.
if you read Eliphas Levi and I think also Plotinus in the
Hmm.
Enneads, they say, well, Plotinus says people like to be enchanted. And what Levi says, and this is in the middle part of the 19th century, he's saying that how magic works best on people of a kind of nervous disposition, right?
Right. I
Because
get
they're
all
more
that. Yeah.
impressionable. They're more
Hmm.
impressionable. But what happened under COVID is people who wouldn't necessarily have been usually of a nervous disposition became nervous and worried, right?
I agree.
And then you get them to that point, and then you start banging them with the images of the masks or the shots or that horrible spike protein that they used
Right.
to
Right. Right.
parade over everything, or the
Uh-huh.
death counts that they would scroll across the bottom of the television, but also with the slogans: keep everybody safe,
Right.
new normal, build back better. And the thing is, those slogans were not just particular to the United States, they were across the West.
But don't
Across
you
the West.
think again, like the slogans for the other tribe? My hero Stephen Vizinci, who died. He toppled the statue of Stalin. In Hungary, he knew this stuff, but he said, like, beware of those people who have simple ideas to complex problems. Run for the hills. Beware of the great simplifiers. And I just don't see that, like, so we're countering simplicity with simplicity. Not that you're a simple thinker at all, but certainly Trump is just playing the same game. Yes, he was better on free speech, but now he seems to be trading that in so fast. He seems to have traded in, like it was his job, his better record on, here's Philip joining, his better record on things like war. But uh, Philip probably knows the answers to
There he
everything.
goes. Here he comes. There he goes. He's
Oi,
back. He's in. He's out.
oh yeah, here I am.
No, I
Guys,
mentioned Max Blumenthal a little bit before, but I was just saying that I just have a fear that what I'm seeing, where there could be some sympathy for, especially in the Regeneration Podcast fan base, for like really true causes, that um, if this was to be pinned on the left, which is one kind of growing narrative that seems to be growing, I disagree with that. I think there's a Groyper connection, but that I'm saying even there's a problem with the nation state. Donald Trump again ushered COVID through customs. I just don't think there's that much to be gained from it, and I just think we're falling into a culture war. But like Philip, let me just give you kind of a blank slate. But Michael and I both began by kind of just saying, and it's almost neat because you're unprejudiced by our previous conversation. What strikes you, if you were a novelist, what strikes you as the narrative thread? And we're definitely using this kind of centrality of the Charlie Kirk assassination. What's the main storyline? What are its diversions? How do you tell the tale to somebody over the course of a beer in a bar or something?
um, well, I mean, I think the first thing with all of these that I try to remind myself of this, because it's so easy to forget that I don't. Not only do I not know, but I have to think in terms of possibilities and probabilities rather than this or that. And I think if I were writing a novel, it would have to be some particular genre where I was writing a chapter telling the same set of events in five or six, different ways, and then sort
Mm.
of leaving it to the reader which of these seems most compelling to you as a, as which of these narratives seems the most, compelling to you, uh, because yeah, I think that it's impossible to know. Just the way it's, I think with Trump, and not to go that direction right now, but it's really impossible to know who he is, what he represents. I mean, we can come up with different um, hypotheses that are more or less compelling, but it's really, even that basic question: um, is he sincere in what he's saying? It's impossible to answer that question definitively. Um, is it, can we know whether or not he is serving interests that we don't see? It's impossible to answer that question definitively. Um, so I feel like with this story, it's all beginning as sort of a preface that it's sort of, probabilities and what seems most compelling. But, to me, I sort of would start with the date. He was assassinated on the eve of the anniversary of September 11th. If I the odds of that are slim if it's completely coincidental. Now, that could be that just the assassin decided to do that on that date for maximum sort of narrative effect. But we have a political assassination that just at the very beginning is timed at a very particular moment, in a
Right.
moment that is charged with immense symbolic resonance for the United States. And so, just beginning with that fact, we kind of get a sense, if all we knew about this is someone who is well known was assassinated on the eve of 9/11, that sounds like an event out of a novel. That's a compelling start of a chapter or of a book. You know, on the eve of the event that, transformed the nation in XYZ ways, depending on your political ideology or your understanding of history, this event happens. Um, so even from that, it seems like this is being set up either deliberately by some forces that we can talk about, or by just the shooter himself in an act of sort of totally individual decision to do violence. This is being done on a very symbolic day, or on the eve of it. Um, I Now, jumping forward a little bit, it does seem to me very clearly that this is being done to gin up um, left exactly this narrative of left right antipathy and vitriol. Just the way that we saw yesterday, there was this rally in the UK organized by this guy Tommy Robinson, who not only seems quite quite vile, but he doesn't seem like a real person. He seems very clearly he is carrying forward a kind of script. But at this, I forget what they call it. It's not Unite the Right, but save the UK, save the United Kingdom, whatever. You had two sets of events. You had sort of British white, not saying they were white nationalists and necessarily their ideology, but they were white and they were British nationalists, tearing apart Palestinian flags on the stage. At the same event, you have other people burning the Union Jack. So you have these two highly charged actions, tearing apart a Palestinian flag, burning a British flag. Two events that are very clearly going to incense, for very understandable reasons, two parts of the United Kingdom, and both being used to create a certain narrative that look at how abhorrent this other side is. How could you tear apart the flag of a country whose citizens are being uh, annihilated with on an industrial scale daily? Why, from the other side, why would you choose to burn the British flag and confirm all the narratives that the right has about the left? Why would you do these things that just confirm what the other side thinks, about the other team? Um, and in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination, you see two sets of things happen almost immediately. You get certain sort of left figures on social media who are, making, to me, totally, immoral, wrong-headed, comments of, oh, he deserved it, or, finally a political assassination that was carried through. I mean, just sort of glorifications of the violence of his death. And many of those comments that appear on social media, I mean, I'm not saying they are scripted, because many of the people who are doing them are just ordinary people, but they could be scripted. They're almost too perfect. They too perfectly sort of suit this
Well,
narrative of, oh, look at
it's
the, yeah,
mimetic, though. It's mimetic. I mean, a couple will show up and then everybody imitates it, right?
right, yeah, yeah,
It's a mimetic
right,
contagion, is what it
yeah,
is.
right, right, yeah, right,
It's not like with politicians where they all get the memo and they say the same thing at the same time. This, I
Right.
think, was more mimetic. I'm
Yeah.
going to do
And
that too.
mimetic is scary though, right? That's me. If I tie it to Orban, it's not to stay there, but where Vance is going. They use mimesis as opposed to act as the solvent.
Yeah.
That's the crowd phenomenon versus community. And that's why I say salvation, the very act of salvation in our time that we're called to do as Christians of whatever stripe is to save people one by one. Just saying, how are you doing today, Simone Weil? What are you going through? We've got to get them out of these crowd phenomenon. And I just
Yeah.
think that's my approach, Michael. And it doesn't mean, again, it's not a left-right thing, but it's in the use, it's casting out demons by the sake of demons, that using crowds to cast out crowds. And
Mm.
and I think we've got a better way. And I think the actual time is ripe. The other institutional church, it's just creaking and it's falling. And nobody sees that more clearly than you. But people are hungry, for a message that's not just that's I mentioned to some guys at church this morning, reading Rosenstock. He had a vision based on William James before it became the Peace Corps, after World War II. But Rosenstock was a man. He was at the Battle of Verdun, and he knows we need a strenuous existence. Where a lot of people are talking about how do we give jobs to everybody, but like we're at a moment where astrologically, even Mike, we can at least try some of these changes. I'm just so worried that they're using this, and I don't know if Philip would agree, but to create this left-right thing, and it's crowd formation one versus crowd formation two.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I think about that. So, and I've been talking about this for 2 years now,
Right.
about this moment in history,
Sure.
and I just actually.
And so sorry, your microphone's a little bit funny again. You will forgive me. You're perfect again.
Oh,
Perfect.
yeah, that sounds good.
Works.
Up when you're closer, it did.
Now it works.
It works great.
This thing. I got to adjust. Then this is some bullshit right here.
Sure.
Yeah, should be working. It sounds good.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. So anyway, astrologically, I predicted this, I think, at the beginning of last year. So almost going on 2 years. That, and what we see, and here's the thing. My assumption is that as much as they pretend they aren't, that the archons, if you want to either take that as spiritual or as just the guys at the World Economic Forum, or what they call, Mr. Big, whether they know astrology as well as I do, and they know what's coming, and I predict it, and I think that's what we're seeing actually, and to disagree with you guys, is that is falling apart right now. The cabal run by the big money and the bankers is falling apart, and they know it's falling apart. In fact, the week before all this went down in the UK, the part of one of the you may have slipped by you in the news, but the thing is, the UK is broke, and it's about to get really ugly. So what happens? And since they know they can read, not only can they read their financial statement, but they can read the stars, and they go, "Oh, we're fucked." So let's try to finagle things so we run things in the next iteration as well. I think that's part of what's going on. I don't think it's going to work because I also see glimmerings right now, and this is what's coming up next year, especially as astrologically, is glimmerings of a kind of spiritual renewal.
Yeah, I like that part.
No, I think that, I think the bad guys, they're not going to be able to contain it any longer. It's gonna get out of their control. Now, the danger, and I think, I don't know how much danger this is, as Uranus moves into Gemini, is with the tech bros, right? So it might be an exchange from the banksters to the tech bros.
Yeah. Now you're hitting themes we can work with. Yeah.
But no, that doesn't necessarily mean everything's bad. I mean, you can get
No,
a
but
lot.
it is like JD Vance's relationship with his mentor and things. So
Well,
we got to
well,
look at
yeah,
this stuff. Meet Orbanism. This is the
Peter
thing.
Thiel just looks like a wax dummy to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and this is a crazy story that everybody now knows who's young and is disaffected, who's not with, who's the Groypers all know that, is my understanding, but they, or that uh, that Tucker's son works for, the speechwriter for JD Vance, or like this type of stuff.
Yeah.
These are all interesting. What do you think, Philip?
Mhm.
I know you think about this stuff a lot.
Well, I think actually I I agree. I think fundamentally with Michael that I do think they are losing control. I mean, I think that the empire, however, I mean, like, just that's one idiom we could use, and we could talk about the archons.
Sure.
I know that, Preparata, Guido, talks of the Anglo-American Empire. I think that's one compelling sort of analytic. But the empire knows that its power is crumbling. The financial system knows that it cannot continue on in its current form. I mean, just even mathematically,
Hmm.
the debt in its current um, formation is just unsustainable. My fear, but I think this is both a fear and an opening, is that yes, they whoever they knows that this current um, power structure and this current ideological apparatus has run out of steam. And what they will do, which I think is, what always happens, is that they are going to try to create as much violence and chaos
Yeah.
as they possibly can, because through that, the hope is that, okay, then through that, we can reestablish control. If we can get people to kill each other, if we
Hmm.
can create abysmal material conditions, that is the only chance we have of, reiterating, reconstituting our power. But I think also that, yeah, that is
But they
in
have
that
to do that without causing mass riots. You know what I mean? So that's a tough one. That's a tough dance to perform.
it is. Well, I think actually this is just to say one thing, we don't have to go in this direction, but I think this is really what's happening with the war in Ukraine. I think I
Is
really
that still
do,
going on?
yeah, I know.
I
But I,
haven't
I
heard about it.
but I really think that my real fear there is that um just as what happened with the first two world wars, that a world war, a Europe Russia, real war is coming, and it, through that will be an attempt to reconstitute control, because the gears are still all in motion there. I mean, the every day, new they're not well covered, but new stories come out about the preparations that continue to be made, for that conflict. And then likewise in the United States, I mean, you said about riots. I mean, I kind of go back and forth, because on the one hand, I think, well, yeah, they can't have, riots to the extent that they could turn into, storming of the Bastille. But at the same time, it does seem like, here's a question. Does it seem to you like it's possible that a certain degree of violent civil conflict within the United States, the UK, Europe, could be instrumental in the attempt to reconstitute control?
It could be, but I don't think it's something they
I
can.
think so.
I don't think. Well, I think they could try to do it, but I don't think they have the numbers to do it. I don't think it's in the U.S. I don't know about the UK, but in the U.S. So and I've thought about this a lot actually. I
Mm.
don't think. Um, well, I think if Joe Biden were still in office, we'd be fucked. I tell you that. I mean, not that. I mean, I think it would be. Well, as it was under him, people talk about Trump as a totalitarian, and we lived through totalitarianism already with the Biden administration. As we were
But are
just
you worried
talking,
about what's gearing up though right now, Mike?
no,
You
I'm
know,
telling you, but I'm telling
yeah,
you right now is
yeah.
that um, if Biden or if Harris had been elected, we'd already be there. It would have already steamrolled over
That's
our
small
entire
comfort
country.
to somebody like me. I'm just curious about like we're going to start losing our freedoms again. And I just don't know if I find it comforting that like we
I
know it would have been worse, you know?
Well, I know it would have been worse.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I
just
tend to
telling you.
think so.
But I do think, like I said, I think they can't hold on, and I don't. I even think, just astrologically, it's not in their favor
Mm.
in the beginning of next year. But I think, and I've been predicting since forever, you know, a lot of chaos and craziness between right and I even actually this happened. What planet was I think it was? I gotta check what planet just moved.
We should
Stay with
try
me,
to
gentlemen.
stop that. I think we should find a way
No, because
that
this
we can
this is almost
make.
no, check it out. I mean, this is
I just
I
think we're
because
like
I looked
slowly
at it.
walking. It's like the Sleepwalkers, you know? I haven't read the book, but we don't need to walk into massive violence. We
Here
could
we
get a
go.
word out. What do you think, Philip? And I want to hear this, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Well, you know, I wonder, I really fear like how, well, first, I am very optimistic in the long
Yes.
term,
Okay.
but I do wonder how, insofar as we remain paralyzed
Yeah.
within the current political sort of paradigm of thought, which is broken into left right and which is defined by, a conception of electoral politics, the legitimacy is very questionable. Um, how are we going to get ourselves out of this unless we really have a miracle, a miracle of a change of mind where the limits of our political and moral thought are not paralyzed, one, by this sort of left-right binary which has been around since the French Revolution and is
In
in
its
no way.
own way, Soloviev would say since Socrates, he critiqued the sophists and the
Ah,
conservatives, right?
Yeah.
For
I
their
see.
for their for their weaknesses that we both have. He accused the because the left is always, as Stendhal said again, intellectually arrogant. He saw the sophists. He more or less painted a picture where they had seen how something was different in Persia, ergo, there's no such
Mm,
thing as truth, like a modern bad
mm,
liberalism. So he
right,
critiqued it,
right,
and then he
right.
looked at the conservatives, more from the heartland, and he said, "You guys are always morally arrogant, and your
Mm,
morality is so caught up in your codes, it has no room
mm,
for growth, and your own hypocritical."
mm,
So he got crucified between two themes. And I want to say,
yeah,
yes, French Revolution, same as it ever was. These things
I
are
see.
temperaments that I see in my own
I see.
children that are
Yeah,
juiced by the powers that be, that they don't
I
let
see.
the liberal temperament have the
Yeah,
yang of the of that vision, and they don't have the liberal temperament have the yang of the conservative vision. They keep that
right.
out,
I
so we
see.
just fight. We fight, right?
So
And
I
we're
see. So
all
they're kind
we're
of
all
they're
truncated.
archetypes. That
Yeah,
kind of. I see. I see.
yeah,
Well, so but
So
if we continue with those
yeah.
and we continue within the current political structure, where our only kind of conception of political salvation is to vote someone in at the end of a 4-year cycle, someone who is always, you know, vetted to an immense extent prior, and who can only come to power through, you know, an effluence of money. How are we going to get ourselves out of this without having it follow a cycle where you have Trump finish his term? He will push forward. I mean, saying from one, maybe this is also probably Preparati's view. Trump will push forward a certain agenda. When he is done, and you know, the left is furious and the right is sort of demoralized, they'll put in someone like Zohran Mamdani who will move it forward from the left perspective. And then the sort of dance will just keep going. And at the end of 4 years, we'll think one side will think, oh, thank God we have someone new. And half of the right or the left who had just been in power will think, well, I don't like this new person, but I realize that the person who I thought I liked, whether it was Trump or Biden, actually failed. So, okay, fine, we'll give this new person a chance. And then the dance just keeps going. So if we have an opening next year, what will that look like? I mean, what kinds of powers can come in to the breach to enact a kind of revitalization? Um, I, yeah.
I like that framing a lot. I like that. And then I think it's going to be stewarded by those powers that be to this,
Mm,
for me, way too easy right left thing. And we just again, I think it's like we're favoring Spengler. That it's so fraught with promise, this internet culture of like young men who listen to 3 hours of information. They know Roman history, but their
mm,
philosophy of history is so anti-Christian, even though they're all using the name Jesus. They're all using the
mm,
name Jesus. I just say, put that away. Let's talk about the Holy Spirit. But it's the name Jesus, like the commandment, don't take the Lord's name in vain. I'm not so sure it's not being used in vain,
mm,
because it's just cyclical history they're talking about. Michael,
mm,
you were
so yeah.
tracking down.
So
Go.
to take the temperature,
Yeah.
um, and this is it's amazing how this. I mean, because I always watch when the outer planets move into new signs, and you can always guarantee something's going to happen.
Yeah.
something big, and not necessarily conflict, but some big cultural shift. And so the interesting thing happened. So, which is these are things that, in fact, what's going on now in the sky has not happened since the beginning of the axial age. That's how big this.
Really?
Yes.
I'm aware of that. Yep, there's things. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the more interesting things, even if it was just this was the only thing going on there, is that Neptune moved into Aries last year, which Aries, 0 degrees Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. So it's like the reset button, right? And Neptune being a planet of spirituality and higher minded ideals and dreams and things like this
Yep. This is
moves into
all for
Aries. So
real.
that's
Yep.
like an
Yep.
age of dreams and dreamers. Interestingly enough, not long after Neptune moved there, Saturn comes there, and Saturn is like the father, right? Also the structure. And Saturn had been in Neptune or in Pisces, which makes it kind of nebulous, right? It's not really at home in that sign, and now it's just moved back. So the power is kind of, I would say, this is interpreting it with Saturn has moved back temporarily. It's going to move again back into Pisces. So that's why everything seems just kind of effing weird right now. And who's in charge, right?
Uh-huh.
And we don't know who's controlling things. But so, and the other thing is Pluto moved into Aquarius last year, and this is like when I was talking about the tech bro age.
That's the biggie, if you ask me.
But it's coming out of the sign of Capricorn, which is, and this is the banksters. This is the the subprime mortgage thing. This is all the stuff that that's been going on. But connected with this, I think we were talking about things that are falling apart right now, like with the financial systems of the West that are based on monopoly money. Um, but the other thing Mike and I were just talking about is this impending information drop from Bobby Kennedy in Health and Human Services about vaccines and harms to children, which that's what they're floating. I just saw it this morning. I read it to my wife. This headline that the the suspicion is that's what he's going to drop this week, and already in anticipation of that, the stock futures for Pfizer and Moderna and the others has started to sink. And if that drops, and if that is what he says, what the CDC comes out with, that's gonna that's gonna be much bigger because these are the gangsters. I think this is very connected to Saturn and Capricorn or Pluto and Capricorn. These are the gangsters who have been running a kind of shell game on with the American health for the last generation, even going back to Anthony Fauci and AIDS, right? Or if not longer. As we talked about captured agencies, talk about captured agencies when big pharma has such influence on government regulatory agencies, right? And I think Bobby Kennedy, and I've read his book, I've been following him for years. You know, he's got their number, and of course he's I think he's had to walk delicately. And I'm a little concerned, I have to tell you. I think Trump is supposed to go to England next week. I'm really wondering if they're going to try to take a shot at him in England. Because
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
it's
I think Kennedy's been neutered, like a lot of this stuff. I'd have to look that
but
up.
I thought people say that, but I actually, at what I've seen in the last couple of weeks, I don't think so.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I'm
don't think
just
so
not
at all.
sure.
And I don't know if
Yeah.
you caught that hearing this week with the Senate panel hearing with Aaron Siri, who's just a brilliant lawyer who has defended people injured by vaccines, and basically this physician who's ended up being a pharmaceutical rep, basically, and didn't know what he was talking about and got destroyed. And they were in this other, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was an amazing hearing. I was listening to it while I was working the other day. Is that the jig is up. The jig is up.
Hmm.
And if this drops next week which I think it's supposed to this coming week or the week after, I think it's going to reverberate throughout government,
Interesting. This
politics.
will be a fun one to track over a couple of weeks.
I
Yeah.
mean, oh yeah, international politics. I think it's going to be, well, as we saw, right? As during COVID, where what was it? What percentage of the wealth migrated from the bottom to the top? And
Mhm.
I saw, I mean, I don't know about you, but I knew all kinds of people who were in desperate straits and all kinds of small businesses around here where I live that closed down, and nobody gave a shit about them,
Yeah.
right? Nobody, and that's one of the things that came up in that hearing is that the guy who got roasted for his weak defense of big pharma was saying, we can't, you don't have to be mean. And Aaron C, you know, we don't have to be, I can't remember the word he used. And Siri was like, what do you mean? You talk about, the people who did, no one has been more maligned than people who had their children injured by vaccines or lost their jobs because they refused to get one. Right. And so you're gonna sit here and bellyache because we're picking on the pharmaceutical industry. Come on. Right. But I think, all of these things, well, like I said before, all of the structures are falling apart at the same time in real time. And in a way, you could look at the shooting of Charlie Kirk, which was tragic, and the response, which was horrible for at least from the left or some of the parts of the left, as actually peripheral to that, because the real thing is the real thing. There's something so much bigger than that going on, and I think these, whether you think it's Israel or whoever you think it is that took Charlie Kirk out or whatever's going on or who's handling Trump, and people say that, or handling the U.S. government. I said, I mean, do you think it only goes one way? Do you think Israel has dirt on the U.S., but the U.S. doesn't have dirt the other way? Didn't you guys ever read Spy versus Spy in Mad Magazine when you were kids? You know, but I think what's going on is it's gonna, well, put it this way, we're gonna have uncertainty and chaos for a while yet, few months, probably till the beginning in January, February of next year. And I hope nothing really bad happens, but I think it's going to be um, fraught by uncertainty, without a doubt.
Philip. Philip.
Well, I can I uh can I invoke the perform the voice of Preparata, even though he's not here, and maybe he would
You might
disavow
even
sort
still
of what
hop on. Yeah, I
you
don't
might
know.
saw. Um, well, so I guess that the first thing is, as much as I would very much like to believe that, I mean, something like what you were saying about Bobby Kennedy and, and vaccines and sort of that, you know truth coming out about, I mean, yeah, just the extent to which the pharmaceutical industry has poisoned and profited, off not just the American people, but also, you look at, what's been done to the people of Africa,
Mhm.
real kind of genocidal stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I would love, I mean, for the truth, for all these things to come out. My my fear, or my concern, is that the the truth ending up being used as a weapon and or a bridge to usher in the next form of tyranny. Um, and my concern is, I don't know enough about this, but for instance, I know that I think Bobby Kennedy has been promoting a new sort of universal whole virus vaccine. Um, uh, so I guess, in that regard, okay, you reveal certain knowledge about certain, drugs, that haven't worked. You build up a certain credibility, use that credibility to usher in something, something else. Or another thing that I think a lot about in the vaccine issue is that two things. One, there's the question of, will liberals believe it, you know, regardless of what's said. I mean, I think
Yeah.
no. I think whatever is said will be kind of filtered through a, a particular lens, that says, this is all, this is all Trumpian sort of BS, and we're not going to take this
Hmm.
seriously, and that can further polarize, so that actually there's a way in which potentially you release information that is truthful, but then that, gets mobilized to heat up the temperature even further between sides. Um, and I mean, I imagine actually that if it is the case that truth does, that, things come out about the COVID vaccine, for instance, the effect will be to bring up the temperature, um, to further heighten
Oh yeah,
the
but
tension.
I think that'll be part of the chaos I've been talking about for sure.
I see. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
but I
then,
think,
but going,
but it's
yeah.
no. You guys know this book? You can't, it's reversed.
I
The,
do. Yeah.
the
Oh,
Constant
yeah, I
Super
think,
great.
Gardener. Now,
yeah.
they came out in 2000 because Philip, you were just talking about the kind of the basically pharmaceutical genocide that took place in Africa, which is what which both the movie and the book are about. And I
Mm,
want to read you just what John Le Carre says in part of his postscript. And now in the film, they have a mythical drug called Dipraxa, which is kind of like Roundup, basically. He
mm,
said, "There is no Dipraxa, never was, never will be. I know of no wonder cure for TB that has recently been launched on the African market or on any other, Bill Gates, or is about to be. So with luck, I shall not be spending the rest of my life in the law courts or worse, though nowadays you can never be sure. But I can tell you this. As my journey through the pharmaceutical jungle progressed, I came to realize that by comparison with the reality, my story was as tame as a holiday postcard. And that's in 2000, long before we even experienced what happened with COVID, and but where people started to realize how absolutely corrupt these kinds of corporations are. And if you look back in 2000, I bet you would talk to most liberals at that time, and they would say they had deep suspicion of big pharma. We now call it
yeah.
big pharma. I don't know how they became acolytes all of a sudden, but right, even I think was it 2017, 2018, where Pfizer or was it Moderna, one of them, paid the biggest fine in history for pharmaceutical injury. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, and talk about magical operation, right? All of a sudden, all it takes is the right slogans and the right repetition of message and the right images, and you can turn the devil into an angel.
Yeah.
But even
When
David
it
Cayley
comes from
mentioned
it,
something
oh,
good. Go ahead, Philip. Yep.
oh no, just to say, I mean, I think just very quickly, I think, to humanize to some extent, the base for both sides comes from love and concern for one's children. That's the primal thing, on both sides. That for the primal emotion that is manipulated for liberals on this is the fact that people think, I don't want my kids to get some horrible disease. I care about my children, and I've in, internalized the idea that if I don't do certain things for my children, if I don't listen to certain authorities, bad things are going to happen to my children. And that's the kind of the primal emotion that then, of course, it gets warped in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
But at the end
And
of the day, everyone
it's
cares about their
capitalized on
kids.
from the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
And
But what Philip's saying is that like this is already being capitalized, or I am saying is this is already being capitalized by the right. Like they know where they want this to go, and it's
but
not a real threat.
and the unhappy thing about this,
Hmm.
and this is you can see already see this. Say that Bobby Kennedy tomorrow came out and said, no, they're all dangerous. They're all going to kill your kids or give them cancer. And who wants to admit that they did that to their kid,
yeah.
right? And I wrote about that in my Substack this week because this is precisely what my family went through with even though I was anti-vax at the beginning, Bonnie talked me into doing just a little bit. We'll stagger them, and we found a doctor would stagger we wouldn't do all of them, but we'll do some of the vaccines, right? And we did it until my son Aiden got injured.
Mm.
And then Bonnie became like one of those classic stories. She became militant anti-vaccine because now, I mean, she was, and here, like you said, Philip, Before that, she was afraid something would happen to one of her kids. And now the fear switched from not only, I was afraid I was going to do something to one of my kids. Now the fear is, oh my God, I did something to one of my kids.
Yeah.
Microphone issues
And
again.
a lot of people won't be able to deal with that. Right?
Yeah. It's a psychological, I mean, I thought about this. It's a psychological bond that if you did get people to really understand what had been done, I mean, with vaccines, but then also, I think, I mean, it doesn't even just stop there. All the food, all the, you know, in things in clothing, in soap, in everything, to get people to really, if they really accept what they unwittingly have done to their children. I mean, that is a psychological bomb that would produce such a sort of a void that, again, two things could come out of that: something really good, or if certain forces were prepared to capitalize on that moment of just, oh my God, what have I done? What has happened? If the wrong forces are prepared to mobilize that, really horrific things can happen.
I
And
want to
just to
say
say,
our forces
yeah,
are
go ahead.
prepared to mobilize this. No,
Yes,
that's all I'm
yeah,
saying. They're
So let me
prepared.
yeah.
ask you, hey,
I
what do you
know that
guys
to be true. Yeah.
what do you guys
Yeah.
think about the theory with Bill Gates that not only did he design Windows, but he or his team designed the viruses to infect Windows so they could sell you antivirus software.
I have no evidence, but it makes total sense. I would
Yeah,
need
and
to be
this is the guy
convinced
with
out of it.
this is the guy promoting vaccines, right?
Yeah,
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 I would
yeah,
you'd
yeah.
have to give me evidence showing that that clearly was not true, because it's too compelling otherwise.
I
That
will.
it's
Okay.
and yeah, it's too obvious.
Apple does Mac products don't get viruses.
Yeah, right,
I
right.
think
Yeah,
I introduced earlier, Philip, and again, this might be a place where you go meta on me, that in the today, in the is he a Groyper versus or is he a leftist? That's still open and to me somewhat interesting. And that's about just like this Epstein storyline, that when they tie it to Ivanka and her history, or they tie it to Tucker Carlson's son or something. The interesting one is the Mossad connection. That's going to be lost by this next news cycle. To me, that was the interesting one. And it was being distracted by the left and the right, and then it got replaced. And we'll see if it hangs in there. But on this one, um, when we see, for me, I don't know about this, but like the Kash Patel famous delay, like he's on the hot seat, he could be gone. That the delay is all of a sudden, I think the sniper, they didn't know who this guy was. I don't think, he could have been even been groomed, but they didn't know the date and the time. That's just me positing that. And that he was a groiper. He was following Nick Fuentes. That I guess I buy. I don't, but the display of the shell casings thing is weird. So I don't know. But they found all these shell casings like in the wood, like the kid had time to set up a museum display to groiperism while he was trying to escape. But like,
Well,
do you
but the
see
thing
any
is,
nuance in there?
I
Yeah, do you
mean,
see any? Yeah.
I think with things like that, you can't just assume because he wrote something down that's what he was. I mean, he could have been also
But they're
trying to
pretty
implicate,
significant. Like if
but he
you
could have
had
been
three
trying to
lines from,
implicate
yeah.
the other side
Oh,
too,
sure,
right?
yeah.
yeah.
But
I
when you
mean,
look
so
at
I
his
don't know.
family right now, I'm still convinced when I look at his family, and again, time will tell. But and I hear you totally, Michael. I think the guy was probably a conservative, a guy kind of who had a transgendered roommate or something. What do you care about that stuff? Enter that from any perspective you want, Philip, because I have no idea.
I mean, that's a little harder for me to believe than,
Mhm.
Charlie Kirk is critical of transgenderism. I want revenge.
Yeah, for me,
That seems a
that's less
little
hard to
easier to
believe. Yeah.
believe.
Uh-huh.
But
I
I think with all the with if that is Groiper graffiti they was writing around, that could be, who knows? We'll find out.
Yeah. And
Maybe we'll find out.
his video games, if that line is true, were very tied into the Groiper community. Yeah, go.
Well,
I think
yeah. Go ahead, Philip.
no, I think in the same way that you would have to give me compelling evidence to
Right,
believe
right.
that like Microsoft didn't create the viruses, you'd have to give me compelling evidence to believe that this kid did it on his own, and that
Hmm.
he was not in some way or
Totally
another
groomed. Yeah.
manipulated or sort of pushed into doing it. So I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I think knowing what I know about the history of the United States and political assassination in the United States, I would need to be he is manipulated until proven a lone wolf
Right.
I
I
understand
in
that.
my
I
mind.
I understand
totally
that.
I totally
Yeah,
agree with that because
Uh-huh.
I think that not with that crazy guy who tried to kill Trump at the golf course. I think he's his
Oh,
own
the
case.
crazy pro-Ukrainian guy, or not
Yeah,
pro,
that guy.
not pro, but
But the other
pro
kid,
NATO war
it's
guy.
it's a very similar profile, and I think both of those kids
Mm,
were like my students, right? They were traumatized through COVID
mm,
by, their schools closed down. They don't get to socialize, so they end up online in weird Reddit chat rooms trying to reach out to somebody, and they get
That's
radicalized
where this
or
guy was. Yeah, and
poisoned.
I believe he got radicalized in there,
But the thing
maybe
is, I'm not just
groomed.
talking about that,
Yeah.
but that's where bad actors could go in there, just like child predators use those rooms.
Mhm.
right.
It could be bad actors, could be from the government, could be from our
Yeah.
government, could be from Israel, who knows, who would also start working on, just like here in the great state of Michigan. Remember those guys who wanted to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer?
Mm.
Then we find out they were all they were groomed by the FBI.
Right, right, right.
They were a bunch of rednecks. They're like, yeah,
It's like a
they
bad
weren't.
episode out of Andy Griffith or
It
something.
was,
Yeah, yeah.
Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think if they would do that to some hillbillies in Michigan, you better believe they would do it to some disaffected kids online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My theory du jour is that he was groomed, that maybe they didn't know the day or the time and things like that, but I don't,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
I you have to say, not really to push back, but I think as far as the day before September 11th, I mean, I think September 10th in Utah by a kid who lives in Utah is it, you know, I mean, that worked out. I mean,
Yeah,
it's gonna be he didn't have to travel, right?
yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Tell us about Max Blumenthal, Phil. It's you think he's the most courageous journalist out there?
Oh, I mean, I was being, a
Well, no,
little,
I mean, in one sense, I've seen his work,
but it was,
but you have my backing. The guy's
yeah.
fearless and stuff.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. He's fearless. He has an interesting backstory. I don't know it well enough, but his father was a journalist, but also a senior advisory role to Hillary Clinton, very close
Hmm.
to her. And he came up a lot. I think he came up in the Hillary email leaks, not in any of the sort of. He never came up in any of the really sordid stuff. He was never
Mhm.
kind of associated with that, but he was um, an ally of Clinton, and even this is like 20 years ago or something. There's some line of Hillary Clinton praising Max Blumenthal's work, but I think she didn't know who he was, and this was
Yeah.
before he really got going. But he comes from a very kind of establishment Democrat, um, you know, I assume, well-to-do, just because, father having a
Mhm.
prominent position, Jewish DC family. And, he said in various places, what drives me is my, rage against the journalistic establishment, that that gives me my sort of energy
Mhm.
to go on is this. And I assume, given the fact that I also come from, family journalists who, have been, whose hearts are completely in the right place, but I think are, deeply deluded about, reality. A kind of it seems to me like a wounded fury at you take something like journalism, which in principle should be an essential part of not just a democracy, but any sort of, state, built on, fundamental moral principles. And you turn it into one of the primary means for violence, exploitation, rape, both, metaphorical and literal, and a primary tool of manipulation to push society and people to the worst ends. And you can feel in, looking at Max Blumenthal's sort of, work, whatever
Mhm.
you think about different parts of it, that, you know, he's powered by that. And so I respect that. I respect the fact that he's sort of been, in terms of Palestine, Gaza, Israel, he's been doing this for a long time, but he is not left or right. I mean, you could, if you had to put him somewhere, you'd say, okay, maybe he's more left than right, but that is
I
not
agree.
within his sort of, he's not shilling to any group. And frankly, a lot of the left really hates him. They kind of called him a pro Assad person just because he was pointing out all the, propaganda about, not that I'm supporting the Assad government or him. I mean, he was a dictator, but all the propaganda put into effect to destroy Syria, to now put ISIS in charge of it. So a lot of the left doesn't like him. But he's been really fearless. I mean, he goes into, Washington, into the Capitol all the time. He makes big scenes. He calls people out in public. There's a great video of him going into an Anthony Blinken press conference prior to
Oh yeah,
Biden
I remember
leaving
that. Yeah.
office. Yeah. And he's basically saying, he's speaking, as a Jew, saying, you know, you are destroying my religion. How dare, I mean, his main point is, obviously talking about Gaza, but saying, how dare you? I mean, not only are you carrying out, mass execution of children, but you are also destroying, my faith, to the world. I mean, you are the chief anti-Semite. Um, and so I think it's also, it's so important that, you have some people like him who are Jewish, being some of the most sort of, non-ideological, powerful voices, saying this is not about left and right. You, Anthony
Wow.
Blinken, you're the anti-Semite. Um,
Wow.
so, and then he does his team does great work on other things happening in foreign policy, politics. They've done great work on, the war in Ukraine, on, uncovering various sort of US backed color revolution type stuff. Um, I'm amazed he's still working, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
often wonder,
So
does he
why?
have,
Yeah.
is his father kind of in the shadows, kind of protecting him to some degree? Because I'm kind of amazed that he's not, you know, he hasn't wound up in a ditch somewhere yet. Um, at the same time, the last thing I'll say is I tend to sort of be on Preparada's side on this, and I feel like Max Blumenthal has been moving, is sort of on the side now that, yeah, Israel has taken over the U.S. government, and I mean, that view is sort of, gaining prominence on
It's
both
gaining a
sides
lot
of
of
the aisle.
prominence. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of evidence there. I tend, even though it seems inarguable to me that, the Israel lobby and Israel wields immense power. When knowing the history of Israel, the state, and the creation of the Middle East, it's very hard for me to believe that it's not, as Preparada might say, the Anglo-American imperium
Establishment. Yeah.
that is the real puppet master holding Israel in front of it to take the flak. Because when it comes out, and it will come out soon, that in Gaza, the real death toll, it's going to, it's already, I would bet any amount of money, it's already over 700,000 people. It's
Wow.
going to be well over 1 million. And
Wow.
when that comes out, that will be
Wow,
another
Philip.
psychological bomb that people will, oh my God, it wasn't just 70,000. They've killed 500,000 children. And that's going to come out. And when it does, my kind of thought concern is that, well, the US or whoever, the archons will be able to hold up Israel and say, Israel made us do it. The Jews made us do it.
Mhm.
We didn't want to do it. We didn't want to kill 1 million kids. The Jews made us do it. And that it will be the perfect fall guy that will fit all these sort of patterns. It will create, all this sort of, sort of epistemological chaos. But that's my sort of concern, is that Israel, even though obviously it's, the IDF is doing the killing, but that Israel is being prepared to take the blame for this crime and all these other crimes. Because you see, people like Fuentes, not that I, agree with
Yeah.
Fuentes on,
Yeah.
on most
Yeah.
things,
Nor
but
do I.
he argues, as do maybe on the left, that Israel was the driving force behind the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. They did 9/11. So I fear that a narrative is being prepared that, like, at least the last 30 years of US foreign policy is going to be pinned on the Jews. That,
Yeah.
Look, Israel made us do it. Israel had secretly taken over all these levers of power, and it was all them. And, the US will be able to, after some rites of penance, sort of wash itself clean.
Wow.
I don't know how that works exactly, but that's sort of my conspiracy theory fear, is that this is what's being prepped.
Heavy, heavy. How about this? That kind of like we've covered current events before. I think, we'll develop an informal regeneration brand name, but we're going to be weaving you in with your permission, Philip, as some of this unfolds. We'll get
Very
Guido. We can think of others. I think Tara, Michael, and you think of people, but we'll do episodes as we always do on just kind of random things. But talking to you last week, I knew you'd be following this really closely, Philip. And so I'm going to link to your work again and encourage
thank you.
people to read what you do. Michael, again, we disagreed on some things today, and we're not going to be didactic, but there's no doubt we can continue, because good people can always kind of work together to figure this stuff out.
It's okay. You've been wrong before.
I love it. I love it.
So have I.
Well,
But we all agree in the possibility of, that out of, I mean, it seems like both of you agree that out of the inevitable chaos that's coming,
Yeah.
there is the possibility for, for true light
I think
shining forth
something
more
good is-
brightly than
Yeah.
before.
There's something good on the horizon for sure.
yeah.
God willing.
Amen. So to be continued, folks. Thanks for listening to the Regeneration Podcast, and thank you both, Philip and Michael Martin.